When my father married Sophia, I was 11. My mother had been gone for 13 months. A sudden aneurysm that stole her from us between breakfast and dinner. One moment she was laughing at my terrible piano recital. The next, she was on the kitchen floor, her last breath staining the tiles. I still remember how her laughter echoed in the hall that morning, the way she'd tousled my hair and told me to practice harder. I remember how her hand was warm in mine as she pulled me in for a hug, promising she'd make my favorite pasta for dinner. I remember the smell of bleach in the kitchen when I came home from school. The paramedics' boots were muddy from the rain, tracking prints across the tile as they carried her out on a stretcher. Dad's face was pale, his hands shaking as he signed the paperwork. There were no goodbyes, no chance to tell her all the things I still wanted to say. For months, the house felt hollow. Every room echoed with memories that only I seemed to notice. Dad stopped playing the old jazz records he used to dance to with Mom in the living room. Her teacups sat gathering dust on the shelves, the lipstick stain on one of them fading, but never gone. I would sneak into her closet at night, breathing in the scent of lavender and chamomile she always carried with her. I'd press my cheek against the softness of her sweaters and close my eyes, pretending just for a moment that she might still be there. And then there was Sophia. She came into our lives like a storm, sudden, bright, and impossible to ignore. She was a corporate strategist, Dad said, someone who could bring order back to our messy world. She wore her hair in sleek chignons, her clothes always perfectly tailored. She never raised her voice, but every word felt sharp enough to cut. "Makes me feel alive again," Dad said, his voice soft but with a new firmness that told me I shouldn't argue. "I need you to try, Lina." I tried. I told myself she wasn't replacing Mom. I told myself that maybe she could help Dad smile again, that maybe this was what healing looked like. But even at 11, I knew that healing didn't come from replacing someone you loved. The wedding was a small affair. No big church or lavish reception. Dad said he couldn't bear another big event so soon. Sophia wore a dress the color of pearls, the neckline dipping just enough to show the diamond pendant she never took off. She had a smile that looked practiced, like a model in a magazine, and she smelled like expensive perfume and cold ambition. Wore a pale blue dress that Sophia had chosen for me. The fabric was stiff, the lace scratchy against my skin. I remember how the hem brushed my ankles as I walked down the aisle, my feet too big for the delicate ballet flats she'd bought. The photographer's flashbulbs made everything feel unreal, each moment frozen in light that didn't seem to touch me. Sophia's laughter rang out as she slipped the ring onto Dad's finger. It was loud, too loud, the echo of it bouncing off the walls and into the hollow of my chest. She looked at me once, her eyes narrowing for just a moment before her smile widened again. She was everything my mother wasn't: polished, deliberate, a woman who could turn a conversation into a negotiation without ever raising her voice. I tried to smile. I tried to be the perfect daughter. But inside, I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, the wind whipping around me, the ground crumbling under my feet. The weight of that smile was a mask I didn't know how to take off. Sophia moved in the week after the wedding. She arrived with 3 moving trucks and a team of men in pressed uniforms who carried in box after box of things that didn't belong to us. My mother's mismatched teacups were packed away in newspaper and replaced with minimalist Scandinavian mugs, white and smooth and soulless. The hand-painted pottery she'd collected from local artists vanished overnight, replaced with sleek vases that Sophia said made the room feel bigger. I stood in the doorway and watched as they carried out my mother's piano, the one she'd played every Sunday morning. Sophia told me I could still practice, but she'd bought me a new keyboard, one that fit better with the aesthetic. It was small and cold, the keys too light under my fingers. I didn't touch it for weeks. The garden was next. Mom had loved that garden. She used to spend hours in the sun, dirt under her nails, teaching me the names of every wildflower she planted. Coneflowers, peonies, foxglove. She said their names like magic words, weaving them into stories as we worked. In the evenings, she'd pour tea from a chipped kettle and read to me under the wisteria, our laughter tangled in the blossoms overhead. Sophia didn't see magic. She saw mess. The garden was ripped out in a single afternoon. Men in matching. Jumpsuits arrived with power tools and shovels, digging up every memory I had. They paved over the earth with gray stones, turning the riot of color into a sterile entertainment space that Sophia said would impress Dad's colleagues. "We'll have parties here," she said, running her hand over the cold stone. "It's much more elegant." I nodded because I'd learned that's what she wanted. I nodded because Dad wouldn't look me in the eye. That night, I sat at the edge of the stones where the wisteria used to bloom, my fingers tracing the cracks in the new patio. The moon was full, silver light washing over the empty space where my mother's garden had been. I tried to remember how it smelled in the summer, sweet and earthy, the way it clung to your skin like a promise. I tried to remember the stories she told me, the laughter we shared. But all I could hear was the cold echo of Sophia's heels on, the stone, the hollow laughter of parties that hadn't happened yet. I promised myself then that I wouldn't forget, that no matter how much she tried to erase, some things were mine to keep. For 3 years, I played the dutiful daughter. I learned how to smile through clenched teeth, how to say thank you even when the gift felt like a chain. Sophia bought me designer clothes that fit her vision of who I should be. Clean lines, muted colors, fabrics that itched like guilt. She said they made me look more grown up, but I felt like a mannequin in a window, posed and lifeless. I learned how to read the room. Sophia liked things neat and controlled. No clutter, no loud music, no talk of the past. At dinner, she'd ask about my grades in the same tone she used to ask the caterer if the salmon was fresh. Dad would smile at her questions, and I'd answer politely, even when the words felt like glass in my throat. Sometimes when I'd slip and mention Mom, Sophia would tilt her head just slightly, her lips curving in a way that wasn't quite a smile. "Let's focus on the future, Lina," she'd say, and Dad would look down at his plate, his fork pausing just for a second before he started to eat again. I wondered if he remembered the way Mom's eyes lit up when she talked about my art, the way she'd save every scribble I made like it was priceless. I wondered if he remembered the nights we'd all curl up on the couch, the 3 of us, watching old movies and eating popcorn with too much butter. Or if those memories had been paved over, like the garden, buried under Sophia's smooth, gray stones. But I tried. I tried to be the daughter Dad wanted, the daughter Sophia demanded. I got good grades. I learned to sit still at the endless dinner parties she hosted, to smile at her friends and laugh at their jokes. I played the part so, well, I almost convinced myself it was real. Almost. Beneath it all, I was drowning. My laughter felt hollow, my smiles brittle. At night, I'd lie in bed, tracing the cracks in the ceiling and pretending they were maps. Maps that might lead me back to the girl I used to be. The girl who used to sing in the garden, paint her dreams in watercolors, and believe in the stories her mother told her. I missed her. The breaking point came on my 16th birthday. I'd been accepted into a prestigious art program, my first real passion since Mom died. It felt like a breath of air after years underwater, a chance to create something that was mine, to finally feel like myself again. The night before classes were to start, I was sketching in my room, a mess of charcoal lines on my hands and the scent of turpentine in the air. My acceptance letter was pinned above my desk, a promise I'd whispered to myself every night. That's when Sophia walked in. She was already dressed for bed, her silk robe cinched tight around her waist, her hair still perfect even in the dim light. She held her phone in one hand, scrolling as she spoke. "The Lawrence's gala is this weekend," she said, not bothering to look at me. Their son is interning at my firm. You'll be attending." I paused, the charcoal stick still in my fingers. "But the program starts tomorrow." She didn't even blink. "I canceled your enrollment this afternoon. It's not the right fit for you, Lina. Connections matter more than paint and paper." I felt the words like a slap. I turned to Dad, who was standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. He opened his mouth, then closed it when Sophia touched his wrist. My heart sank. I wanted to scream, to beg, to demand he see me, really see me. But the silence was heavy, and I'd learned that sometimes silence was easier than fighting a battle you'd already lost. That night, I lay awake, the acceptance letter in my hands. I traced the raised seal with my fingertips, each swirl and flourish a promise I couldn't keep. My tears smudged the charcoal on my hands, streaking black lines across the white paper. Felt like the walls were closing in, every door locked from the outside. My mother's garden was gone, my art stolen before it could bloom, and in the echo of Sophia's laughter at dinner parties, I could almost hear the last notes of a song that had once belonged to me. That night, after Sophia's words had settled, in my chest like stones, I sat in my room for hours, the acceptance letter to the art program in my hands. I traced the raised lettering, the curves and flourishes that had once felt like a promise, a future. My fingers were stained with charcoal and tears, each smudge a testament to everything I'd tried to be, everything I'd tried to hold on to in the quiet. I remembered the envelope. The lawyer had given it to me at the funeral, his expression solemn as he pressed it into my hand. "Your mother wanted you to have this," he'd said, his voice gentle. I'd tucked it away in the back of my drawer, too afraid to open it, too afraid of what it might say. But that night, I wasn't afraid anymore. I was angry. I pulled the envelope from its hiding place, the paper soft and worn from years of being pushed aside. My name was written in Mom's careful script, the loops of each letter as familiar as the lullabies she used to sing me to sleep. Inside, I found a single brass key, tarnished but solid in my hand, and a note written in the same flowing hand. "Look, beneath the roses." My breath caught in my throat. I turned the key over and over in my fingers, feeling its weight. Mom had always loved riddles, little puzzles she'd leave for me to find. A treasure map tucked in a library book, a coded note in the cookie jar. But this was different. This felt like a secret she'd been waiting to share, a message from beyond the veil of silence Sophia had wrapped around us. I waited until the house was quiet, the only sound the soft tick of the grandfather clock in, the hall and the distant hum of Sophia's white noise machine. I slipped out of bed, the floorboards cool beneath my feet, and crept down the stairs. The shadows seemed to shift around me, the weight of the house pressing down like a secret I was finally ready to uncover. Outside, the night was heavy with the scent of damp earth and the last breath of dying roses. The garden was gone, paved, over with smooth gray stones and designer patio furniture. But the old stone planter remained. It was the one thing Sophia hadn't bothered to replace, its cracked edges a testament to a time she couldn't quite erase. I knelt beside it, the key warm in my hand, and began to dig. The stones were cold and rough, scraping at my skin, but I didn't stop. My fingers ached, dirt wedging beneath my nails, but I kept going. I thought of Mom's laughter in the garden, the way she'd called me her little wildflower, and I dug until the tips of my fingers were raw. At last, I found it, a rusted lockbox, half buried in the earth. My breath came in short, ragged gasps as I brushed away the dirt, the lock cold and unyielding beneath my hand. The key slipped in easily, turning with a soft click that echoed in the silence. Inside were papers, old medical bills with red stamps, and numbers that didn't make sense, lab results with words I didn't understand, and screenshots of messages I wished I'd never seen. Dad's texts to Sophia from before Mom died. She's taking Lina to her parents. Come over. Offshore transfers draining Mom's inheritance, each wire marked with cold, clinical precision. At the bottom of the box was a single page that made my heart stop, a lab report. The words were stark and undeniable, elevated digoxin levels consistent with chronic poisoning. The weight of it settled on my shoulders like a shroud. My mother hadn't just died. She'd been erased, her life stolen one careful drop at a time. I sat there in the dirt, the box open in my lap, and for the first time since she'd died, I let myself cry. Not the silent tears I'd learned to hide, but real sobs that racked my chest and shook my bones. In that moment, I felt her with me, felt her strength, her fire. She'd known. She'd left me this key, this truth, because she believed I'd find it. And I promised her, right then and there, that I wouldn't let them bury her memory the way they buried her garden. I promised her that this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. 2 years later, I stood on the terrace of our house. No, not our house anymore, but Sophia's stage, watching the guests swirl around her like planets orbiting a cold sun. The Mother's Day brunch was her favorite event of the year. Perfect white linens, crystal flutes sparkling in the spring light, and enough champagne to make sure no one looked too closely at the cracks in her world. I had learned how to smile. By then, how to slip into the skin of the perfect daughter she wanted. My dress was a pale blue silk she'd chosen for me, the kind that caught the light just so when I moved. I let her fuss over my hair, let her pin it back with diamond clips that glimmered like ice. But beneath it all, I was steel. I watched Sophia laugh with her friends, her voice bright and brittle. She moved through the crowd with effortless grace, the perfect hostess in every way. But I could see the flicker in her eyes when she looked at me. The worry that even now, after everything, she didn't truly own me. When the last guest had arrived and the toasts had begun, I stepped forward, a small gilded box in my hands. The guests turned to watch, their faces flushed with wine and curiosity. For you, I said softly, my voice carrying in the hush that fell over the terrace. A Mother's Day gift? Sophia's smile faltered just for a moment, but she recovered, quickly, her manicured fingers delicate as she took the box from my hands. How thoughtful, Lina, she said, her voice as smooth as the champagne in her glass. She lifted the lid, and the blood drained from her face. Inside, nestled in velvet, was a leather-bound album titled A Daughter's Gratitude. I watched her fingers tremble as she flipped open the cover. Page 1. Mom's autopsy report. The words, in black and white, undeniable. Page 2. Dad's embezzlement records. The cold numbers of betrayal. Page 3. A screenshot of Sophia's email to her sister. Once the trust fund clears, we'll finally be rid of the brat too. Sophia's hand jerked, the album slipping from her fingers and landing on the stones, with a thud that echoed in the stunned silence. You wouldn't dare, she hissed, her face pale as the lilies in the vases around us. I stepped closer, my voice soft and calm. The FBI already has copies. But here's the fun part. I own 51% of your firm now. Thanks for signing over those birthday stocks every year. Her champagne flute slipped from her fingers, shattering on the stones like the illusion she'd built around herself. Around us, the guests began to murmur, their polite laughter turning into uneasy whispers. Sophia looked at me with wide, terrified eyes, and for the first time, I saw her not as the polished strategist who'd stolen my family, but as a woman who'd built her world on lies. I lifted my glass in a toast, my smile steady and bright. To family loyalty, I said, my voice ringing clear. The applause that followed was thin and forced, but it didn't matter. In Sophia's eyes, I saw the reflection of everything she'd tried to bury. The garden, the laughter, the girl. She'd underestimated. I saw myself. Not the grieving child she'd tried to erase, but the heir to my mother's fury. As the final applause faded, the guests shifted uncomfortably, their champagne-slicked smiles cracking at the edges. Sophia stood frozen, her hands trembling at her sides. In the bright May sunlight, the perfect illusion she'd built around herself seemed to shimmer and flicker, like a mirage on the edge of collapse. I felt a calm settle over me, deeper than anything I'd known in years. It was the calm of truth, of finally being seen, and of knowing I could never be silenced again. Dad stood to the side, his face ashen. For a moment, our eyes met across the terrace. There was no comfort in his expression, no fatherly warmth, just the hollow awareness of everything he'd lost the moment he let Sophia's hand guide him. He took a step toward me, his voice rough. "Lina, please." I shook my head. "You let her do this," I said quietly, my voice carrying only to him. "You let her take everything from us. From Mom." He flinched, and for a moment, I almost saw the man he used to be. The man who'd lifted me onto his shoulders to pick apples in the garden. The man who'd held my mother's hand like it was the only thing that mattered. But that man was gone, buried in the same earth that had swallowed Mom's wildflowers. Sophia's voice was a whisper now, desperate and hollow. "Lina, we can fix this. We can—" I cut her off with a soft laugh. "You can't fix what you broke, Sophia. This was never yours to take." I turned to the guests, the stunned faces of old friends and new allies. "Thank you all for coming," I said, my voice clear and steady. "I think it's time for Sophia and I to have a private conversation." They took the hint, gathering their things and slipping away like ghosts, leaving only the clink of glass and the scent of crushed rose petals behind. When the last of them had gone, I faced Sophia. She stood alone now. No carefully orchestrated smiles, no crowd to hide behind. Just a woman whose empire was built on the bones of the family she'd tried to erase. "I hope you liked my gift," I said softly. She swallowed hard, her lips trembling. What happens now?" I took a deep breath, feeling the cool spring breeze against my skin. Now you live with what you've done. You watch as everything you built on lies crumbles around you. And you remember, every Mother's Day, every birthday, that you tried to erase my mother's memory. And you failed. Her shoulders slumped, and for a moment, I saw something close to defeat in her eyes. But I didn't feel pity. I felt relief as I turned to leave. I glanced down at the broken champagne flute, the scattered petals of roses crushed beneath our feet. In that reflection, fractured and perfect all at once, I saw not the girl I used to be, but the woman I'd become. I was no longer the grieving child, no longer the dutiful daughter playing a part in someone else's story. I was my mother's daughter, her fire, her fury, her love, and I would never let anyone forget it.